Okay, so this week I'd actually like to announce that something I'm kind of proud of. Uh, I can officially say that I have helped with 3 dogs in the USD 457 school district to become therapy dogs. One with a school psychologist that roams around with kid to kid, and then 2 more over at Charles of Stones that actually are classroom dogs, and it's a brother sister pair, and they actually split their time between a couple different classrooms. So I'm really happy that we got through this with them. It's a lot of work to get therapy dogs for an environment like that. There's a lot of training, a lot of time on my part, a lot more time even on the teacher's part. So I guide them, I teach them, I show them what to do, I come up with the rules and plans for them, but they still have to put in quite a bit of work to do it. Now, speaking of therapy dogs, this always brings up a subject I think I talk to people about it, I get asked about it at least once a week. That is emotional support animals, service dogs, and therapy dogs. So there is a difference between all three, and I'm going to just actually briefly go over the differences of them and what you can expect from each one. I myself only work with therapy dogs. I do not work with, or I guess emotional support, but we'll get into that, whether or not they even need work. So I work with therapy dogs, but I do not work with service dogs. The reason for that is there's some liability concerns, but also mainly is just the amount of time required. There's a lot of effort and time required into a service dog. So let's talk about the differences. A service dog is actually defined by the American Disabilities Act, and it is a service dog or miniature horse. Those are the only 2 things that can be a service animal. Now, a service animal is something that is an animal that is trained to do a specific task for the owner, or the handler, I should say. Or maybe not even the handler, because sometimes somebody else will be handling the dog, depending on what the issues are. But they are needed for medical assistance in some way, shape, or form. Now, this can be varied in a lot of ways. Obviously, everybody thinks of the seeing eye dogs, but it's not just that. There's a number that help individuals with brain trauma or autism or different other cognitive issues, such as situational blindness, which is when you just become overwhelmed and suddenly you just don't know where you are anymore. The dogs are trained to guide those, see the signs of their people when they hit that state, and then guide them out. There's those that are used to detect early detection of seizures and things. Now, the thing is, they have to be trained to do that. These are the only animals that can be out in public. If it is a restaurant or something like that, they are not protected by the ADA if they are not a trained dog or miniature pony or miniature horse, I should say, to do a task for a disability. Service dogs, they work with one person. That's it. They are trained for that person. Therapy dogs, on the other hand, there's not much guiding them. Therapy dog, usually, think of that as, this is a dog that's meant for lots of people. And the key difference between a therapy dog and a service dog is a therapy dog is invited. They're invited by the facility to be there. Either the facility trains a trainer to have the dog there, or it's like a hospital and they ask groups that have therapy dogs trained to go in and get used to those types of environments, those types of people, and be in a very calm state so that there's little to no risk to anybody there. That is what a therapy dog is. So I work with mostly it's schools. Right now, as I just mentioned, I have 3 that are currently in our community. I have 3 more in the works. Some of them are a little young, which I'll get into that here in a little bit, as far as the requirements for service dogs and therapy dogs. So therapy dogs, they work with lots of different people and are invited in. They cannot go to restaurants. They are not protected by the ADA. They're not protected by anything in fact, because they are generally just invited into that location. But if they still have to follow the Food and Drug Administration rules, USDA rules, things like that, which means they are not considered an animal that's allowed to be near or around food for human consumption. Then we have emotional support animals. This is where a lot of people get confused, and in fact, even the media gets confused, and they'll grab a story and they will explode with it, and they just kind of go off on how some place didn't allow an emotional support animal in. Well, no place has to allow an emotional support animal in. An emotional support animal is not protected by the ADA. An emotional support animal is part of the Fair Housing Act, which basically means the only thing that an emotional support animal gets you is to bypass a rule or a lease that says you can't have pets, basically. Now, an emotional support animal can be just about anything. It still has to be legal for where you live. So, for example, here you can't have crocodiles and alligators in Garden City. So, guess what? You can't have as an emotional support animal. You can't have something like that. You can get around certain other, maybe some breed-specific laws. That I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to go into that. That's a whole nother ball of wax. But as far as the basics of the law, an emotional support animal just lets you get by lease requirements. Now, an emotional support animal still needs to be declared. It is not a natural trained animal, which is why I kind of made a joke earlier about, well, I've worked with some emotional support animals, but really, it's just your average pet. Whether or not it's an emotional support animal or not, that is between that person and whoever is declaring it for them. Usually, it has to be declared by a psychologist, a therapist, social worker, somebody in that line of work, where they're working one-on-one with that person to determine. So let's go through the differences real quick again, because that is very important. Now, there is service dogs. One person for the animal can only be a dog or a miniature horse. They are trained specifically for a medical purpose. Emotional support does not count. They have to be doing something for that person's disability in some way, shape, or form. Therapy dogs. Lots of people not trained for one specific task. Generally, they can be, actually, a therapy dog can be for a number of different reasons, but they are invited by the place. They cannot go to places where there's human consumption of food and general rules where there's no animals allowed by federal or state or local law. Therapy dogs still have to follow those. But they are invited in to work with lots of people. Now, there's a lot of advantages of therapy dogs, particularly they're finding more and more research about how good they are in a classroom. They just help calm a lot of kids, and they just kind of create this kind of random empathic connection with the classrooms that they're in. And then there's emotional support animal. An emotional support animal only is something that gets you through a lease requirement, but it still has to be declared by a professional. And it's not a dog professional. This one has to be some type of psychologist, therapist, social worker, etc. But they're the ones who declare something to be an emotional support animal, and usually that is for something that person has. Maybe they have depression, maybe they have anxiety, who knows? Doesn't really matter. Now, with the therapy dogs and service dogs, they actually don't have to have anything on them declaring that they are a service dog. It's a kind of an idea of it draws too much attention to the person who has a disability, who's already too much self-aware of their disability. So that's why they don't need those requirements. Now, to get a service dog or therapy dog, it takes a ton of work. You will be working with that dog for months and months, if not a year, at least. Now, I'm working on some currently that are puppies, but I've even already warned the people that we're working with while we are training and setting them up for success, and hopefully I still will not okay them until they're around a year old. The reason for that is because you don't really see a dog's personality until they're fully of age. Basically, their teenage years, at least, I should say. It's just like people. You don't really know what their real personality is until those teenage years kind of hit. Then you can kind of see where they're going. Now we can set them up for success and such early on, because if you wait until they're already a year old and things have gone wrong with their training, or they just maybe they had a PTSD moment because of some somewhat traumatic event. Hi, Kitty. Then we will need to then it's less likely that they will succeed in being able to pass the requirements for service dog and for therapy dogs. So that is the gist of it. I'm super excited that we have some that have succeeded. We're working through some that are currently going through the ranks, and I have very high hopes for. But it takes, as I said, a lot of work on our time, their time. There's a number of organizations that we have to work with. When you get things like therapy dogs, you have to work with your insurances. You have to work with whatever body is in charge, whether it's a board or principals or things of that nature, to make sure all the things that they want and require are there. I have worked with a group out of Florida. There's also the International Therapy Dogs. And I'll actually put all the links in here. In fact, actually, at the end of this, I'm going to put all the links for all the various laws that I've kind of mentioned in here as well, for those that would like to continue looking forward. But that is the general gist between the three. So if you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me, let me know, and we will get in touch with you later. Y'all have a good rest of your week. Bye now.